Hello, and welcome to The Humanistic Counselor, a podcast in which we discuss, analyze, critique, and celebrate both well-established and cutting-edge ideas across the field of humanistic counseling. I'm Brett Wilkinson, Editor-in-Chief of the Journal of Humanistic Counseling, otherwise known as JHC. I'd like to welcome Dr. Kenson Hyatt, an Assistant Professor of Graduate Psychology in the Counseling Program at James Madison University and a licensed professional counselor in Virginia. His areas of research and scholarship include humanistic counseling, religion and spirituality in counseling, clinical supervision, multiculturalism, social justice, cognitive development, and addiction recovery. He has experience in the areas of addictions, career, college, and general mental health counseling. As a counselor educator, Kenson loves helping counselors in training develop by seeking balance between support and challenge. In today's interview, we'll discuss his 2022 JHC article entitled Compassion-Supported Development, a Humanistic Approach to Counseling Supervision. Dr. Hyatt, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me on, Brett. I'm glad to be here, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. In the article, you distinguish empathy from compassion and suggest that compassion is often overlooked as a vital component of effective counseling and supervision. You then propose a new compassion-supported developmental approach to supervision, making a case for its unique value and outlining associated supervision practices. So, let's start with the term compassion. What is compassion? How is it different from empathy? And how do you operationally define it in this article?
Well, compassion can mean many things to many people, Brett, and the definition I adopted for compassion supported developmental supervision is not meant to exclude or override anyone else's definitions. Just want to put that out there first. However, for the sake of simplicity and turning to the evidence found in the literature, I've adopted the definition from a 2016 study by Strauss and colleagues. And if you happen to find my article published in 2022 in JHC, you can find a link to that study. But anyway, they reviewed all available definitions and measures for compassion in the literature at the time, and their study revealed that compassion tends to have three main factors. So first, there's awareness of suffering. Second, there's feeling emotional and or cognitive poignancy, so feeling moved by that suffering. And then third, acting or having the desire to act to relieve the suffering. So while empathy is typically understood as understanding how someone else is experiencing the world through that person's unique lens, compassion is recognizing another person's suffering, empathically sensing it, and then acting or feeling motivated to act in a way that might relieve that suffering.
Okay. And so then compassion is a very central aspect of what you do in this work. And you go further because you look at the multiple types of supervision. And in the article, you discuss three particular types of supervision. You focus humanistically oriented ones: psychotherapy-based, process-based, and developmental. And then you argue for the merit of developmental approaches, in particular for humanists. Why do you think developmental approaches are particularly suitable for humanistic supervisors? And how does the developmental lens inform your compassion-supported approach?
Well, human development is one of the primary concerns of humanistic psychology. So, for humanistic supervisors, it should be important that we help our trainees with their development as clinicians and, more broadly, as human beings. And personally, that's an interest to me as a supervisor. I'm interested in continuing my development, and I feel that every trainee that I help has the potential to make me better, to further my development. Developmental approaches often emphasize understanding how human beings develop cognitively, morally, ethically, and intellectually. And in the past, counseling researchers have identified cognitive complexity or other similar indicators of growth or maturity as indicators of a counselor's ability to be helpful to other people in a counseling setting. The most common framework for developmental approaches is support and challenge. And the idea behind that is essentially that we tend to experience growth when we have an appropriate balance of support or psychological safety and challenge or the discomfort of new experiences that perplex us and prompt us to reconsider something about ourselves. For compassion supported developmental supervision, this framework plays a fundamental role. It's central.
Okay. And so, what does this look like in practice, this compassion supported developmental approach? Are there particular features that you'd like to hone in on to help our audience understand more?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll refer you to my article to read in depth what it looks like theoretically, but from my own experience with it, compassion supported developmental supervision tends to look, unsurprisingly, very warm, empathic, compassionate, supportive, but also appropriately challenging when needed. Although I want to be supportive through challenging experiences and times of suffering for my trainees, I also want to provide challenge if they seem to be too comfortable and they're at risk of complacency or stagnation in their growth.
Mhm.
So, what I've found is that most trainees who are in a healthy place respond very well to my approach and feel very supported through their training experiences, which are often difficult and stressful on their own. I've also noticed that my approach feels very relational and brings supervisor and trainee close together in meaningful and mutually beneficial ways. I tend to learn a lot from my trainees just as they learn from me. And I love that we create more harmony together in our circle, and that can expand outward to our other social circles when we share empathy, kindness, and joy together.
Okay. So, it sounds like part of what you're identifying is that as a supervisor, when you bring in a mindful, compassionate mindset into the supervisory space, that you serve as a model for the student or the supervisee. And at the same time, you're creating a space for them developmentally to feel perhaps relaxed in their developmental trajectory. Can you speak more to those components?
Yes, absolutely. So I do want them to feel relaxed as kind of a default. At the same time, I know that's not always going to be possible. There are times where it's just going to be inherently stressful. They're going to be in a situation where they don't have the answers or they feel extraordinarily stressed or challenged in one form or another. And I won't always have all the answers either. And I think that's an important part of recognizing, maybe just being honest with ourselves as supervisors, is that we don't always have the answers. Now, hopefully, we have the most important ones as it relates to law and ethics that govern our practice. At the same time, the uniqueness of what we do, the subjectivity of helping another person who's helping other people that we don't always know or see, there's a lot there that can be out of our control. And I think the most essential piece for me is having the kind of relationship where trust is always present. The default is to trust each other, to be relaxed, and to be able to use that trust to be honest with each other. And I think when we lean into the warm humanistic practices that I propose in this approach, that's what tends to happen. There's trust, and they don't feel threatened or worried about the power dynamic as much. They don't feel so worried about what may happen if they don't have the answers, and they know they're still being evaluated, and growth is still the goal, and being competent is still the goal. But that becomes less of a focus as they see that I want to know and honor and understand and empathize with them as a person. And I care so much that I want to relieve suffering when it's there, when it doesn't need to be there.
Okay. And you just noted that there are some particular technique skills, or not really skills or techniques, let's say. They're more like approaches to be cognizant of. You note in the paper about mindfulness and empathy, which you've spoken to, compassion. You also speak to fostering loving kindness and fostering joy. And I'm wondering if you could take us a little bit more into loving kindness and sympathetic joy, I believe is what you've highlighted.
That's right. Yes. So, loving kindness, the general idea that we want good for everyone. We want everyone to experience good things, to be loved, and to experience kindness, both as something they receive and something that they offer to other people. And then yes, sympathetic joy, or I guess there's a Pali word. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but mudita is what I've heard. And that word, when I read it, when I first discovered it, it opened a new perspective to me that I hadn't considered before. That's just become a staple in my life and in my practice, that I want others to experience joy because that's part of loving other human beings and wanting the best for them. So when we experience joy and they experience joy, it's like we're experiencing it when they experience it. It's just wonderful. So think of it as the opposite of Schadenfreude. So when someone else experiences misfortune with Schadenfreude, we kind of take pleasure in that. Um, but in the case of mudita or sympathetic joy, when they experience joy, it's like it's our own. We feel it right there with them.
That's beautiful. And what do you see as the major implications of a compassion supported approach to supervision? For instance, if everybody were to adopt this approach, what would be notably, maybe observably different about the field of supervision?
I think one of the most significant implications of this approach is that it can reduce tension, anxiety, and stress in the supervisory relationship. I personally feel less worried about supervision when I lean into a compassionate focus on the growth of my trainees, and they feel less worried about the nature of our work and our relationship together when they feel warmly supported through their training challenges. I think we could all do with more kindness, empathy, mindfulness, and joy in our lives. So I think supervision and training don't have to be tense. They don't have to be dominated by power dynamics and constant evaluation, although those things still matter and they still are part of the relationship. When we focus a little more on the warm qualities of a good relationship and focus a little less on the tension that's naturally there, um, I think we change the dynamic of that relationship. We slowly change the field. We encourage growth while increasing the harmony between us, and that can spread outward in our circles. It makes everyone better if more people are practicing this way, I think.
Okay. And I'm left with something when I most recently read this paper, I came away with a particular uh, sense that this serves almost, Dr. Hyde, as a method of personal development and a framework that seems valuable regardless of the particular supervisory approach or techniques that one might use. So it almost seems as though this could be not just its own approach, but a foundational element of practice, akin to a Rogerian approach, where a lot of people in counselor education, we say, okay, let's develop a Rogerian base, and then you can build out from there. And I'm wondering what your response would be to this sort of statement.
That I love that. That I agree, Brett, that it could be very foundational. It could be a way of being more than a way of doing as it relates to supervision. There are plenty of valuable things to consider in all of the models and approaches out there for supervision. And I guess I'm not suggesting that my approach needs to supersede any of that, but rather serves as a great way of recognizing in ourselves and in other people the kind of person we want to be and the kind of person we want them to be in order to make a better world, a better counseling experience, and a better counseling profession. And I think this could serve as that kind of foundation, just like the Rogerian foundation for counseling in general and our skills and our training tends to be the foundation that we lean on.
And is there anything that you would recommend to listeners who might be interested in cultivating greater compassion in the supervisory space or just in their lives in general? I know at one point you note loving kindness meditation in the paper as part of the case vignette. Are there any particular things that you would recommend for people to consider for themselves and their growth?
Absolutely. I think loving kindness meditation would be one of those. But really, it's what provides meaning to you and encourages growth and joy in your life. And I don't mean the temporary pleasures or the temporary experiences that come and go every day. I mean the things that you do, the things that you um, can actually produce or structure into your life that bring joy and meaning. And those kinds of things, I think if they are consistently part of you and you're not afraid to share them with other people, um, that tends to be a good part of your foundation as a supervisor. And for me, I guess, looking at my approach, one of those things, just to get me started when I was thinking about this approach, is what do I really want to happen for my trainees and for me as a supervisor? And the first thing that came to mind was love. I want there to be love. And I know that love is a term that people take in a lot of different directions. It can be construed lots of different ways. But I just thought that to me is when I know that everything is good, is when love exists and there are fewer barriers to it. And so I think that when I am the kind of person who is experiencing, emanating, giving, and receiving love freely, I'm a much better counselor, a much better supervisor. I'm really better in everything I do in my life. When I sense that barriers are coming up, I try to figure out how to remove them again so that it flows freely again.
Well, I think Virginia Satir, for one, would absolutely agree with you, don't you think?
Yes, I agree.
Okay, so one last question before we wrap up here. What do you think is particularly valuable about humanistic counseling?
To me, one of the most valuable contributions of humanistic counseling is its focus on meaning, subjectivity, development, and the human condition. I think those are things that I've focused on a lot as I considered how to be a supervisor. As human beings, we want to understand and be understood. We're drawn to things that deepen our sense of what it means to be human, and most especially one another. Although most would associate humanistic counseling with the warm, supportive qualities that have come to characterize it, I suggest that it's also meant to provide a deeply challenging exploration of the human spirit in ourselves and in others. So I think maybe we overlook that sense of challenge sometimes. And I hope that that's not lost in my approach either. That challenge is the other wheel that turns in growth, that we need support and challenge. And we need that as human beings in order to really reach our potential and become our best selves.
Fantastic. Dr. Hyatt, it's been a pleasure talking with you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Likewise, Brett, thank you so much.
And many thanks to you, good listeners, for spending time with us here at the Humanistic Counselor Podcast. All JHC articles can be accessed through the Wiley Online Library. If you're a member of the Association for Humanistic Counseling, then you get free access to this article and many, many others through the American Counseling Association website at www.counseling.org. If you'd like to become a member of AHC, then we hope you'll visit our website at www.humanisticcounseling.org. Thank you, be well, and hope to see you here next time on the Humanistic Counselor Podcast.